short presentation on the ISTE standards, the importance I consider for using them, and some examples for how I implement them in my classroom and in my professional experience. So first of all, I'm just going to go over three of them just so that it keeps this video somewhat concise. And they're the three that stand out to me the most. I think that they all have importance, but I find that these are the ones that I interact with the most. And some of the other ones, like such as citizen, are something that you're always using as an underlying culture setting in your class. Whereas these, I think I can show some more concrete examples. So the three are collaborator, designer, and facilitator. And I'm going to go through each. I'm going to explain to you what my interpretation of the standard is, and then show you some examples that I have for my classroom. All right, so standard 4 is collaborator, and a couple things to understand that being a teacher that follows standard 4 is that we're collaborating with a lot of different people and then also teaching collaboration skills. The first group that we should definitely be collaborating with is other teachers. I'm sure most educators in the field have had some experience collaborating with other teachers, but you often find that you come up with the best ideas so quickly just when you talk to somebody else about how they would teach a certain lesson. So it's very important for us to do this and also focus our collaborations on how can we use technology in our classrooms and how can we create learning experiences in which students truly learn how to use technology and how to become technologically literate. The second group that we should be collaborating with is our students. Now, I've found that oftentimes when I teach a topic, I'll have students do research for some portion of the unit, and I always almost learn something from my students just from things that they've found out through their own research. I think it's really important because it empowers the students and also can add a lot of engagement into their interest in the topic. We should also teach our students to collaborate with one another. Oftentimes you'll think of projects that use any of the Google Suite, but we also need to focus on not just how do you use that software and other softwares that allow for collaboration, but we also need to go over things such as communication, whether that's in person or online. For the IST, obviously online is such a big deal, and it's something that you need to know almost for any job now, is how to communicate with one another over things such as Zoom or Google Hangouts or Skype. So setting up meetings is very important, and then also just teaching things such as deadlines and other important things that they're going to need to figure out when working with groups. So a couple examples that I'm going to show that demonstrate Standard 4 is one of the projects I made for my freshman students, and then also a Canvas page that I've made for some of my colleagues. So anyways, if I show you here, this is the project assignment description that I made. But on the first page, that's the grading rubric, which isn't necessarily important for me to show you. What I do want to show you is this important thing is the students are in groups. They need to use the Google Suite, and I'm giving them step-by-step directions on how to use this. And I also think it's important to point out that I also didn't make it one big project. I tried to break it up into smaller pieces and have each piece have a different due date. And the purpose for this was so that they were working efficiently in groups and learned that they needed to do some of these things, not when they necessarily wanted to do it, but when it worked for the whole group. And also I thought it would replicate more of a team setting in a job setting where you have multiple pieces of a project you have to do because they're so large. Obviously, this is a smaller project than what they would be doing after they graduate, but it does kind of follow along with that same process. The other example I want to show you is my Canvas 101 page. This Canvas page I created is made for faculty at St. John's College High School. And really, I made this as a resource for new teachers. So essentially, when you first come to St. John's, you may have zero experience with Canvas, the learning management system we use. So I have some lessons that just tell you what it is and how it works, and then other things are specific, such as setting up your page, adding your students, and then other things on here, little skills that you can do. However, this advanced practices section is currently being added onto and it's open to all members of the faculty. Now, we've only had this up for about a week now, so we haven't added many new features yet. But the whole purpose of this section is what can we learn from each other, and how can we add collaboration to better use Canvas and better suit our students. And just to give you a walkthrough of what the lesson format I've been using is, so if we look at lesson 8 here, using the discussion board, if you go through here, it has a learning target. They'll normally have some sort of video lecture, and then for this one, the assessment is to respond to a discussion board prompt. This is just another way to foster communication between colleagues. Obviously, there's not any due dates, but if they wanted to share some examples in there just to help each other out so that we could see how other teachers are using the discussion board, it's incredibly useful. So anyways, let's go back to the PowerPoint here. The next standard I want to go over is Standard 5, which is Designer. And Standard 5 is essentially just we need as educators to make sure that we are designing different activities, different lessons that are going to utilize technology in ways that actually are going to assist learners. Now, there's ways where we can use technology that it's not allowing for students to actually think deeper on a topic than if they didn't have the technology. For example, giving a student a PDF of a textbook versus a hardcover copy of a textbook, it doesn't really improve the product or improve the teaching practice. However, we can use technology for students to produce things that they wouldn't have been able to do without the technology, and that's what we should really be looking for here. Also, we can use technology to allow for differentiated instruction, so students can use more different tools and that would fit their learning styles, and also it gives an opportunity for students to learn with more sources than they ever have before because of Web 2.0. So I want to show you guys some examples here of just a few things, and I put 4 of them on this list. They're all basically using all 3 of the principles, but I just want you guys to get an example of how I follow some of these standards. So the first one we're going to look at is this famous Supreme Court cases assignment. And the famous Supreme Court cases assignment I made essentially is a way for students to have a self-paced lesson using technology. So this way they're going to get a lot more illicit information rather than tacit information just from me teaching. They'll have access to go back to it, pause it, rewind it, watch it again, and fill in anything that they did not get. So you'll see on the left-hand side I have the different court cases they were learned about. Now, I was doing this in a classroom setting, not in a digital setting, so I used QR codes. Basically, I like using the QR code in that setting just as a way to add engagement. But the students would bring, they all have, I teach all students with iPads. They would bring the iPad up, scan this QR code, then it would link to a video describing the Marbury versus Madison case and what went on. And while they were watching the video, using their iPads, they would also answer these questions on here and submit this worksheet back to Canvas once they've finished. So this was just one way that I used Principle 5. Here's another example, would be the Italian Renaissance virtual tour. Now, I had students go to the District of Columbia's Smithsonian National Gallery. We were learning about the Renaissance, and I wanted them to see the difference between paintings in the Middle Ages and the Renaissance so that they could see how much the intelligence level changed over time. And I just copy and pasted some of the pictures onto this document to show you more quickly. They went to the website and there were specific links for them to go to. But just to see some of the images that were on there, you could just see how it transitioned over time. There's little information for them to read. And we went through each picture, and it was inspired by an actual tour that I went on at this museum. So I thought it would maybe be something that we could translate and use virtually. This is what I was talking about when I said this is an experience we could not have done without technology. Now, I understand that maybe I could have tried to request a field trip. Actually, living in Washington, D.C., it would be possible. However, it would take the students out of school for the entire day, and I was able to use virtual collections online to look at Renaissance art. Okay, and the next one I want to show you just real quick is the Kinder Morgan pipeline controversy. The students were learning about some current events in Canada, and this was one of the ones we went over. They basically had to watch 2 videos and then basically support or refute the creation of the Kinder Morgan pipeline. Once again, you guys are starting to get the idea here. This is just some ways that I integrate some differentiated instruction practices into my classroom. All right, so last we're going to go over Standard 6 facilitator. Now, facilitator is a big deal, and during the new age of education that we, because we're now getting to the point where teachers should be focusing on not being that beacon of knowledge, but facilitating learning in their own classrooms. And that's a big deal, because in the past, maybe you had a few books in a room. Every student may have had a textbook. Apart from that, students were reliant on the teacher for learning. Now, if you have an iPad in front of you, you have access to quick information on just about any topic you can think of. So we should be curating sources for these students, finding different sources for them to learn from, especially if we can find sources that, come from different opinions and have, different multimedia attached to it to help assist their learning. Any way to create engagement, Web 2.0 allows us to do that. Also, I like this to refer to 6B. Manage the use of technology, strategies and digital platforms, virtual environments, hands-on makerspaces, or in the field. So now this is also, I think, including what is the environment that they're learning in. Are we using Canvas pages or another LMS? Is everything hands-on in a makerspace that we